So this is really a workshop report on, which I'll talk about in a second. It's work with Christina, who's over there, Oliver, who's in the room, Christian, who's here, Srinjoy, who's here, and JT couldn't make it, unfortunately. We're talking a lot about energy efficiency, which brings the scope in like this. What we also have to think about is the bigger picture, the cost of making and disposing and reusing equipment. And that's what this workshop at ICT for S was all about. So I'm going to just pull some things out of there just to kind of get people talking over lunch. I'm going to ignore that. That was from another talk. ICT is globally significant. I hope I don't have to make that case to this audience, otherwise we wouldn't be here at all. Efficiency helps you optimize what you currently do. In a climate change scenario, what you need is rapid degrowth. You do not carry on doing what you're doing, right? And we have to be thinking much earlier in the pipeline about the cost of things before we deploy them, and it might be better not to deploy them, right? So, chips. We not used to think about the materiality. Oh, that's covered up. In the 1980s, we were sort of, 500 nanometers. The industry is working very, very hard to get more and more transistors on a die, right? So it is true that you will get more compute for a unit of energy. And this is often used as a narrative to look the other way. But once you put a chip in production, it stays in the market for years. And you keep layering more and more and more. What this means when you start making these puppies is in the 1980s, we didn't use many elements to do this. We had abundant elements like silicon. But now we're using just about everything that won't irradiate you. Okay, that's the whole periodic table. And the amount of energy per unit of die is going up and up and up as well, right? But actually, I think the more critical problem is no one's talking about the limits to the growth in this industry. And you get quotes like this by one of my kind of pals. Well, based on current trends, it's fine, right? We'll just replace the kit with newer, more efficient kit because Moore's law is going to come along and deliver you some more efficient processors tomorrow. And we'll just, would you like some 5G? I can sell you some 6G. Sorry. Anyway, but at the same time, the data centers are getting bigger and bigger and bigger because what this lets you do is bring in new generations of kit with more memory on the processors, more cores, and more energy footprint, and there's not enough disclosure about that. So here's a fact. Already, the amount of data centers in Ireland is starting to disrupt their renewable energy and decarbonisation projections, right? It is increasing the cost and reducing resilience of energy in Dublin. People are paying more energy and there are brownouts because the data centers are so hungry. We're relying on the same material elements for the solar panels and the energy transition and the renewables harvesting as we are for the data centers. So there is a cost to the growth, and it's a cost of equity and theft from one industry to another, who's a very rich industry and can afford to do this. What we're starting to see that this paper, Remy et al. Was talking about 2019 to 2021, so it's already history, but they were talking about how the amount of memory on the GPUs was going up to accelerate machine learning. Therefore, you can put more parameters on there, you can tune bigger models. This is just part of a cycle of growth, but it's even outpacing Moore's law. Jevons paradox, I'm sure you've all heard of this. William Stanley Jevons was an economist in the 19th century, and he talked about, of course, we're making steam engines more and more efficient, they're burning coal more efficiently. They expected to see a reduction in the demand for coal. They saw an increase in the demand for coal because it became more cost effective and cheaper to adopt. And this is where we are in the digital tech industry. I'm going very fast, I've got too many slides. This comes at a cost, right? There's horrendous environmental and human rights issues behind the mining and extractivism behind this tech. A lot of the benefits are felt in the global north, and a lot of the impacts are happening in the global south, right? This is neo-colonialism, this is environmental injustice. We recycle less than 20% of IT kit, and that's not really surprising when you think about how small the quantities are we're embedding and how hard it is to get them back. We're even, flying them in drones to do all sorts of horrendous things and then exploding them. Try recycling that. And these are coming from, this is a protest against a lithium mine, one of the workshop participants talking about. This is impacting communities. This is extracting precious resources and having an impact on the planet biodiversity, populations, human health. There was a lot of other issues we covered at the workshop. I won't go into them now, but if you're looking for topics to research on, stop working. Well, don't totally stop working on efficiency, but here's a load of other ones. We'll put them in the full paper if we get invited to do so. One thing I think I'd like to point out is the twin transition talks about business as usual. It talks about taking what we're doing now and making it a bit greener. I think we need to be thinking about resilience and a transition. You know, we're assuming you can migrate services freely across the world, but what if you can't reach bits of the world because the energy system's not stable anymore? I think there's quite a lot of things that happen when the planetary boundaries are transgressed. And recent research suggests we've already transgressed 6 of them out of the 9. Okay, so ICT impacts are various and significant, and it's not just energy and it's not just carbon. We need to be looking at making our systems radically more efficient in terms of use of materials and longevity. We're tremendously bad at building systems that last. And we need to be thinking much earlier in the pipeline before we just go, yes, I'm going to apply a large language model to my toothbrush to see if it can more optimally clean my teeth. Thank you very much.
This is great. So one of the things we did was we have more machines than we need because the code is typically not optimized, and there's a trade-off there of hiring a better software developer for your ecology project versus buying more computers. Have you seen anyone actually do that kind of looking ahead and making that trade-off too? Because this is, you know, that cost is not often accounted for.
Yeah, so paraphrasing the question, it was the costs of all the computing and hardware needed to do science is not accounted for, is leading to redundancy, I think. Yeah, there was a NERC CEDA project that started to look at scientific computing, and the NERC funder are just about to fund another project, I think, a network that's designed to look at scientific computing and how to promote better sharing and reduce some of those barriers. We also have a project starting in January with CH Ecology about, and one of the aspects we're looking at is sharing and barriers to sharing, and we'd definitely like to talk to you. Yeah. What's the relationship between software, bloatware, and and getting ready? So I think this is fascinating, and our keynote speaker sort of hinted at this. I once went to a workshop where the guy described himself as the chaos monkey. He'd go to a data center and power stuff off, and he'd only power it back on if someone complained. And I think you see this in research organizations all the time. People think about the start of a project, they put a server in, the staff move on to new jobs and leave the server, right? And the sort of technical debt is sort of sitting there. But I think the technical debt of software is very much there. I think we take a library, we add stuff, we take an operating system, we proudly claim, oh, we've added 1,000 new APIs. No one proudly claims they've removed 1,000 redundant APIs and services. So I think there's lots of work to be done on redundancy. I also think there's a huge transparency argument here. It's very hard for software developers to trade off, particularly cloud APIs, library calls. You know, this one's 1,000 times more expensive than that one because it farms out some compute somewhere, or this one's, you know, twice as carbon intense as that one because it executes in a different place. A huge job to be done in terms of the dev tools, and from what I was hearing in your talk, you know, even thinking about long-running things as asynchronous rather than end-to-end synchronous processes would be a transformative change to the software stack. So plenty of computer science, I think, to be done. Yeah. Mm. Yeah, so which stakeholders should be involved, really? Well, I think it's a massive cultural change end to end. I do think funders have to be pushing for accountability. And I think, you know, in the work we've done, we've seen researchers talk about junk science and people doing things just to get published. And, you know, there are huge cultural things to remove that kind of dead wood, so that these things have a cost. If we're going to spend this environmental cost, it needs to deliver real value and not just someone's age index. Oh, did I say that? Yeah. So yeah, probably we have a lot to, you know, to go at in terms of cultural shift. Cool.
Any more questions?
Are there any online, or are we good?
Is there, Brian, is that a question for the speaker? Shall I read it out? Or is that a comment? It's not clear to me. All right. Okay. Thank you. So not a question, please.
Not a question. It's like, get him off the stage. We want our lunch. Was that the yeah? Okay, there's a question up there. Transformative innovation is simply not enough to have see. So as someone advocating for this, what's your advocation to actually do something about it to achieve that kind of system holistic approach? Oh wow. So you want me to solve it as well? Okay. So I think the question was, you know, ICT is so embedded in everything, you can't solve it as just an ICT problem. I think that's kind of what you're saying. Yeah, I think it's bidirectional, actually. I think people are not aware that ICT has a cost. So when they're costing in digital solutions to things that may or may not be improved through the addition of digitization, they're not really thinking of the actual cost and the cost to the future of the resilience and all the other past dependencies that locks in. So I think we could be doing more to make that a fair fight. I also think that I'd advocate for simplicity, resilience, and parsimony. You know, we should be adding stuff where it adds genuine value, and not just adding stuff because it makes some tech billionaire a little bit richer. There's another one of my wild assertions. Yeah.